Thank you everyone for joining to talk a little bit about external funding opportunities that are available to you at the graduate level. I am Nicole Neal. I am the Associate Dean of Research in the Faculty of Education. I am also an Associate Professor, and I also coordinate the MPED in the fields of ABA. So today, we're just going to cover some general tips related to writing for scholarship and grant applications. And then I'll give a little bit of information about some of the upcoming competitions, some of the specifics that are coming through in the next little bit. I'll also be sharing slides as a resource for after the session. There's a number of links embedded on the slides that I'll be showing, so having a copy of those slides might be helpful. It'll be posted on the Research Office website so that you can download that and access and click all those links after this session. As I mentioned, the session is recorded, so if you don't want your face or voice present on there, just make sure to keep your camera and mic off until the question period at the end there. So just some initial tips for writing scholarship and grant applications. The first thing is really considering what they're asking. So reading the guidelines and expectations from the very beginning and designing your application to meet those. So if they tell you to write a certain thing, make sure that you've answered those questions that are asked, and even using the language that they've identified. So you may feel like you've talked about the significance of your study, but even using the words significant, if they've asked for significance, in your application will be helpful. So making sure you know all the guidelines, all the expectations, and meeting those when you're writing. Second tip would be to organize somebody else to read your application. So find a colleague, ideally someone who has applied, even better, someone who has successfully completed the application and received the funding, to review your work. But a second set of eyes can be helpful. We also have a number of writing resources in the faculty as well as at Western that can be peer reviewers for your work. So the Writing Center at Western can support with writing things like OGS or SSHRC scholarship applications, as well as we have the Writing Commons in the Faculty of Education, who I'm sure would be happy to support drafting and reviewing your application. Read other people's grants. We do have a library of successful grants in the research office as a hard copy and a binder. I'm excited to say that there should soon be an electronic version of the successful grants with some updated ones. So look out for that in the coming future as well. So looking at other people's grants, especially ones who have been successful at those scholarship and grant applications, is going to help as well. And then make sure that you're saying what you're going to be doing, how you're going to do it, and the effect that it's going to have. So what are your methods? What is your intent with the project or the funding? How it's going to be done. So making sure that there's clear and concise methodology included, as well as the outcomes and the contributions. It's really important to state not just we'll learn about a very specific topic area, but how's that going to have an effect? How's that going to contribute to the broader field, as well as the broader community? So what are the important effects that come with your research, as well as the specific contributions to the field? 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。
。 . 。 . 。
field. Some more specific suggestions for some of the successful scholarship and grant applications. Spend some time thinking about the opening lines. This gives you an opportunity to set the tone, get people excited, and be confident in your work. So lots of people have a tendency to be humble. This is not the time to be humble. This is the time to show off and show how great you are in that application. Whenever you can provide concrete evidence or examples, so if you're writing something like a personal statement or pieces about your own work, explaining what your qualifications are, whether you have specific training or publications, you've served as a research assistant, and these are the tasks that you did that show that you're qualified to carry out that work, and making sure that you're writing a concrete and attainable plan. A lot of grants and scholarships have a evaluation criteria related to the feasibility of a project. So in your master's, it might not make sense to be proposing a series of 10 studies that answer very broad questions, thinking about what is attainable, and the reviewers will be looking at that as well. It can't be said enough. Respond to every single one of the evaluation criteria in those applications. So look at how the scholarships or grants are reviewed, what criteria they're using, and then specifically answer each and every one of those pieces somewhere in your application, even highlighting or even bolding those areas in your application or keywords that speak to the evaluation criteria. Use headings that align with the questions or sub-questions that you're asked to respond to in your draft. So making sure that you're answering every single question set out by that application call. And you can remove or incorporate your headings into your text, but having an outline that involves each of the things that you're supposed to respond to can help make sure that you have answered all of those questions. And then think about your intended audience. So not all of the reviewers will be experts in your field. Typically, when it comes to things like the SSHRC and the OGS, those are reviewed by faculty of education members, but they may not be in applied psychology or curriculum studies, right? We're getting people from across the field of education. And because education is so multi and interdisciplinary, you may have people who don't have any experience in your subdiscipline. And in some cases, depending on the type of application, like a grant application, the reviewers might not even be academics. So knowing who reviews your work, what that committee is made, who that committee is made up of, and then writing to the audience that will be reviewing your application. When it comes to the methods, typically the methodology is what is being judged in a grant application. In the OGS and SSHRC applications, there's a little bit more emphasis on other aspects as well. But looking at the weighting of those criteria, reviewers have to like both your CV, you and your experience, as well as the project. But typically, the project is one of those deciding factors. Again, that varies a little bit with the OGS and the SSHRC. Some of the scholarships are more about the student and their record than the methodology. Making sure that your method is super duper clear. Having enough detail that a reviewer knows what's going to happen, describe everything explicitly, and don't assume that they know about particular methodologies or how they work. Now, the other piece, of course, is being concise. So how can you make sure that it's very clear what's going to happen without taking up too much space? So to kind of repeat what you're doing, how it's going to be done, and then the effect. And I suggest that you start any grant with this and then go on to answer all the grant's questions. It can be helpful to have almost like a mini abstract at the beginning of your grants and then follow up with more detail. Once again, with the SSHRC and OGS, you don't have as much space, but getting them to understand the topic area and what you're going to be doing in the first sentence or two, and then going on to give your background literature, your research questions, methodology, and outcomes. You have to make sure that they understand sort of right from the beginning, this is the topic area where we're going. And you can see at the bottom, it's not really possible when it's OGS because you only have one page. So just kind of follow the application instructions there. Just some other helpful tips related to writing those scholarship and grant applications. You want to make sure that it's understandable to those who know nothing about your work. Using terms that are accessible to people outside of your field, or explaining any terms that might not be common in fields that are adjacent to yours. Make sure that your writing is very clear, interesting, and not excessively academic. Again, using a lot of field-specific terms, you want to demonstrate that you understand your field, but you also want to make sure that there's clarity to those outside of your field. If you can, leave white space. So having gaps to highlight different areas. It can be challenging in like an OGS and SSHRC application, but trying to make sure that there's some separation rather than a full block of text. Imagine that your grant's going to be read with 5 other people on a commuter flight at 11 p.m. So basically the idea here is that the reviewers are reading a lot of applications in a short amount of time. And so you really want to make it easy for them to find the information that they need to find by using headings or making sure that you've explicitly used terms that are found in the evaluation criteria or in the question pieces so that they can map that on easily. And think about sort of a clever, non-academic as you write your grant and you're writing to that person. Templates. So there's a resource here, and again, I'll share these slides. After sort of giving an overview of your grant, there's a couple templates. They're a little bit older, but they're great ideas for how to structure a proposal. And the formats can be slightly different depending on your approach and your methodology, but it might be helpful to take a look at these and provide you some good templates to use during the master's and PhD scholarship applications. So please check that one out. So next, I'm just going to give a little bit of information about some of the specific upcoming competitions, and then we can open it up for some questions and discussion afterwards. The first one is the OGS program, so the Ontario Graduate Scholarship Program. The application opens December 7th for this, and the final submission is February 1st at 4 p.m. And then in May, the results are announced. This one is $15,000 for 1 year. So 3 consecutive terms. And this one is primarily merit-based. So you're going to generally be writing a pared down or a shortened version of your thesis, identifying outcomes and your contributions to the field as a whole. You can find lots more information about that funding opportunity using those links that are on the slide after the session. The other opportunities are the CGSM and the CGSD, so the Canada Graduate Scholarships. And these can be at any one of the tri-agencies, so SSHRC, CIHR, and NSERC. In general, education students are most frequently applying to the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, although we do every year have a few individuals whose project is more appropriately associated with health research or with science and engineering. So think about your research project, which one it fits most appropriately. Most often it's SSHRC, but occasionally we're having students applying to the other competitions. The master's scholarship, the application closes December 1st. So hopefully you've already started thinking about that application already. You'll want to make sure that all of your materials, not just your written pieces, but the other components of that are in by that December 1st deadline. So the amount for the Canada Graduate Scholarships is $17,500 for 12 months. And it is, the application is done through the research portal. And in addition, you'll also need a Canadian Commons CV, which is done through a website portal as well. I encourage you very strongly to create and log into those portals, both the CV and the research portal, as soon as you can, so that you can ensure that you can access that account, that everything is all set up beforehand. The other pieces that the Canadian Commons CV is a little bit tedious because you're going to have to transfer information from your typical CV into the website portal. So that would be like your educational background, your publications or presentations or those kinds of things. So you may want to get a start on that right away just to make sure that that information is done and you don't have to worry about it afterwards. For the CGSM, you need to be a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident, or a protected person. You need to be enrolled or have applied for or will apply for full-time admission to a graduate program at the master's or doctoral level with a CGSM allocation. You need to have completed between 0 and 12 months of full-time studies, not currently be holding one, as well as have a high average, and you can submit one to either CIHR, NSERC, or SSHRC. So you have to choose which agency. So basically, if you're entering you're planning on applying to a master's program, you can apply for the CGSM right away, or most frequently, people are in their first year of their master's program and applying for the CGSM. The evaluation criteria, 50% is your academic excellence, and this is what's coming from your transcripts as well as your Common CV. So making sure that your Canadian Common CV indicates things that show your academic excellence, whether that's awards, whether that's distinctions, you know, all of those pieces that can highlight your ability as a student. The 30% is related to your research potential. So this would be accomplishments in research. So that might be things like publications, presentations, serving as a research assistant, uh, those kinds of positions. Your interest in discovery, the proposed research. So this is your written description of your project and the potential contribution to the knowledge of the field. So that's really important, those pieces about outcomes and what's going to be contributed by your work. And then 20% is personal characteristics and interpersonal skills. So these would be professional and relevant extracurricular interactions and collaborations. And some of this information might also be gathered from your references as well. You need 2 references for the CGS-M. You should find individuals who are familiar enough with your research or other abilities that they can provide meaningful commentary. So you saw the evaluation criteria, 30% related to research potential and 20% related to interpersonal and interpersonal skills and personal characteristics. So you want to find letter writers who can comment on those areas so that those are highlighted in your application. And it's your responsibility to make sure that your reference assessments are complete and submitted early enough to allow you to complete the application in the portal before the deadline. So you may want to tell your letter writers to submit those references early enough so that you can show that you have a complete application on the portal and press that final submit button. The doctoral level, the deadline was October 17th. So this might be something to think about for the next year. The expectations are similar to the master's level. The funding is larger, it's $35,000 per year, and the duration is up to 36 months. And for this one, the eligibility is similar, except that we're talking about doctoral level programs, and you have to be earlier in your program in order to apply. So you can see that no more than 24 months of full-time study, or if it's an MA PhD, no more than 36 months of time in that program. And similarly, you can submit to either CIHR, NSERC, or SHRC, and you can't apply if you've already received the doctoral level one. You also can't be in a tenure track or have tenure. I don't know how frequently that happens, but apparently it's enough that they have to list it on the application. And then the SHRC doctoral fellowships are $20,000 per year, 12, 24, and 36 or 48 months. Again, that's the October deadline for those ones. I'm not going to spend too much time on that one because those are not the upcoming and pending deadlines. But just to note that these have a greater weighting towards your research ability than the OGS and the master's level funding. So 50% towards research ability and potential, and then 50% towards relevant experience and achievements. For applying for a SHRC program of study, you'll need to identify your current level of graduate study. You'll need to indicate what stage you are at your thesis. You'll want to provide the name of your supervisor of your studies if it's known, so if you're applying to a program. And then you'll want that outline of the proposal with the question, the context, the objectives, the methodology, and the contribution to the advancement of knowledge, as well as what you're hoping to accomplish with the award. So some of you may be doing some revisions to your SHRC applications, and you just might want to review those criteria as you're doing that piece. And then at the PhD level, there's an applicant statement and research contributions as well. And transcripts and references for that doctoral level scholarship as well. So I'm just going to go ahead a little bit. These are in the files for you if you want to review these in advance of the doctoral deadline for next year. So you can find information, or you can apply for both the master's, the doctoral level scholarships by accessing the portal, which is here, and the master's and PhD instructions are linked on these as well. If your area, and the Canadian Common CV link is here, as well as instructions. So all of these will be provided to you so that you have copies of those and can access them as you're preparing your application. If your area is not SSHRC, so if it's CIHR or NSERC, you must apply to CIHR or NSERC. So you can't apply to SSHRC if your area of research is outside of the SSHRC mandate. Things that would be ineligible for SSHRC support would be sort of more clinical education, psychomotor research, clinical research, and particular types of therapy. Now, there's a bit of a challenge because some psychological research might bridge CIHR and SSHRC. And so just making sure that if you're applying to SSHRC with something that you know, depending on how you consider it might fit into both categories, that you're framing it in a social sciences framework or an educational framework, rather than talking about sort of more of a health research one. So my students know that sometimes work might be considered CIHR level or SSHRC because we're in a psychological intervention, and so or we conduct research on psychological interventions, and so just ensuring that what you're applying is the language that you're using and the project truly does fit under a SSHRC umbrella. The CIHR applications have a few more requirements, and then the NSERC program can be found there as well. Like I said, we have a binder of successful applications in the research office. Reach out to your supervisor for support, for reviewing your proposal or giving you feedback or commentary on that. Work with your peers to find review. Ask a roommate. I used to ask my mother to read these things because that was my non-academic audience that could give feedback. And see if it was understandable to someone outside my field. OGS, Erin Daly is the scholarship coordinator at Western, who can also be contacted by email. And upcoming deadlines, your CGSM is due December 1st, OGS February 1st at 4 p.m. And the CGSD would be in October in 2023. So I'm going to sort of leave it there and open it up for opportunities for questions. I have a lot more slides that follow this information that I just provided, but I'm not going to go over all of them. I wanted just to give you them as a package. It provides a number of other links to other funding opportunities that are upcoming or that may be available to you as a graduate student, as well as some tips in there. So thanks for joining me for that quick overview, and I'm happy to take questions.